People always said the Abaji wind blew in strange fortunes, but nobody ever believed it could bend the paths of men and women the way it did with Oluwaseun Adeyemi and Ayaba Aking. They say Lagos is a city where dreams go to die, but it was also where the richest man in Nigeria found himself standing in the relentless afternoon heat, waiting for a bus, just like everyone else. Oluwaseun Adeyemi, billionaire business mogul, man whose name meant honor returns, stood with polished shoes mismatched against the cracked pavements of Oshodi. A rare sight, but today he wanted nothing more than to go incognito. He had driven his black SUV himself, parked it 2 blocks away, and approached the crowded bus station on foot, just to see life as it really was. Real voices, real struggles. Not the curated, filtered version of Lagos that helicopter views and luxury resorts sold to foreign investors. "Na who be dis?" one young man asked the crowd, eyes darting between Oluwaseun's expensive linen and the way he wore his confidence like a shield. "Maybe one of those pastors way dey carry people go heaven in seconds," another replied, and the crowd laughed. For the first time that week, Oluwaseun laughed too. The bus came, rattling, groaning like it carried too many hopes and too little money. The passengers looked at Oluwaseun like he was a ghost. Nobody expected a billionaire to queue for transport here. Not when private jets, luxury sedans, and air-conditioned limos were as common in his world as sand in the Sahara. Then she arrived. Ayaba Aking. Not because the bus stopped. Not because the crowd shifted. But because she stepped in front of him with fierce eyes and disdain that could bulldoze a mountain. Her clothes were simple. Faded jeans, a striped t-shirt, worn sandals that had seen better seasons. Dust clung to her ankles the way truth clings to memory. "What's this rich boy doing here?" she snapped, loud enough for the whole queue to hear. Her voice was grounded, fierce, rooted in something deeper than words. The bus driver blinked. The hawkers paused. Even the heat seemed to hold its breath. Oluwaseun, usually unshakable, felt something like surprise. But he smiled, a gentle smile that carried neither arrogance nor offense. "I'm just trying to take this bus like everyone else," he said. "Ada the billionaire, dey humble himself to catch bus," a man whispered, half in jest, half in disbelief. Ayaba glared at him. "Humbling yourself wouldn't be so funny if the rest of us had stable jobs. But you built your empire on the backs and sweat of people like us." Oluwaseun blinked. Not defensive. Just listening. "Look," she said, voice shaking now, raw with honesty, "you don't understand. Rich men, they buy everything. They buy silence, they buy peace, they buy influence. But they never buy respect for where we come from." Before he could speak, the bus doors closed and the vehicle lurched forward, metal shrieking against metal. Ayaba stumbled and found herself standing right beside him as the bus pulled away. It should have been awkward. It wasn't. "Name?" he asked quietly. "Ayaba. Oluwaseun." Her eyes widened. "The Oluwaseun Adeyemi?" He looked down, unclipped his sunglasses, and met her gaze directly. "Yes." She sighed as if her lungs had been filled with something heavy. "I hate the rich," she said bluntly. And so the impossible began. Weeks later, Lagos streets. Oluwaseun couldn't forget her. Not the way she walked, not the fire in her voice, not the truth she threw at him like spears. He started spending time on those crowded routes, watching Lagos in its rawest form, hawkers calling out prices, street dancers choreographing joy between traffic lights, women balancing crates of tomatoes atop their heads as if gravity bowed for them. But Ayaba never came back to that bus stop again. Until the day she barged into his office. His office, glass towers, marble floors, art that cost more than many homes. She stormed in like she belonged to a world neither the ultra-rich nor the ultra-poor could define. "You wanted change," she said, voice echoing through the lobby. He didn't know how she found him. He didn't care. He only knew that moment was a turning point. "What do you want?" he asked. "To make the rich pay real taxes," she said. "To rebuild schools and hospitals that don't collapse when it rains. To stop funding politicians who steal from children's futures. Most CEOs would have called security. Alyawasian stood there and listened. A strange partnership. The meetings began. Late nights. Intense debates. Ayaba wasn't afraid of him. She questioned him, challenged him, and in doing so, made him confront parts of himself he hid behind luxury and spreadsheets. They walked through slum-turned marketplaces, spoke to workers picking through scraps at Olusegun, listened to stories of abandoned children, sick mothers waiting hours for hospital beds. She didn't want charity. She wanted justice. And in Lagos, justice was always expensive. One evening, walking through Makoko, the floating slum, he asked, "Why do you fight so hard?" She paused, watching kids play by the waters, laughing amid chaos. "My father died because the nearest hospital was too far, too underfunded," she said. "My mother sold firewood to pay school fees. I saw bright minds become lost dreams because of poverty. The rich talk about helping, but they never feel what it means to be without." He nodded, silence hanging between them heavy with truth. That night, he invited her to dinner at his penthouse, the first time she saw the city lights from above. Lagos glowed like a story that refused to be forgotten. She looked out the window, arms crossed. "Beautiful," she said, quiet. "But unnatural," she added. Alyawasian didn't take offense. He knew she saw the world differently. "What if we changed that?" he asked. She turned, eyes burning with cautious curiosity. "Change what?" she whispered. "Everything. First steps toward revolution." Together they launched the Jua Foundation, JUA, meaning Sun in Swahili, for enlightenment and empowerment. The mission was simple: education, healthcare, economic support for underserved villages and city slums. The first community they chose was Ayaba's home village, Nyali, on the Kenyan coast. Fishermen cracked nets at dawn, women carried baskets heavy with produce, children tiptoed through dust on bare feet. They arrived to applause, but not all applause was friendly. Some saw money, not meaning. Some saw power, not purpose. "You can't change us with dollars," an old man said one morning as the sea breeze whipped through palm trees. "We will drown in charity without dignity." Ayaba stood beside him, listening more than speaking. Alyawasian watched her, admired her, the way she held fire and compassion in equal measure. The two worked from sunrise to sunset, reorganizing school funding, building clinics, hiring teachers and nurses who came back to serve their homes. But change was never easy. The first months in Nyali were harder than either of them imagined. Alyawasian, used to boardrooms and polished floors, found himself wading through mud after torrential rains, helping unload sacks of maize and buckets of water. Ayaba moved with ease, a natural daughter of the soil, commanding respect from villagers with words that were both sharp and tender. She knew them, and they trusted her. Alyawasian knew he had a lot to learn. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind coconut palms, Ayaba led him to the schoolyard. Children ran barefoot across cracked earth, their laughter piercing the tension of poverty like sunlight through clouds. She knelt down, adjusting a small boy's tattered shirt. "See this?" she asked. "This is what real hope looks like. Not fancy gadgets. Not private jets. Simple dignity." Alyawasian swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He had given millions in donations before, but nothing had ever felt this real. Watching her, seeing her kindness unfiltered, he realized he wanted more than admiration. He wanted to be worthy of her fire. Yet, as they worked, the friction between them sometimes ignited like lightning. Ayaba had little patience for his world of strategy meetings and press releases. "Money alone doesn't fix broken hearts," she said one day, slamming her notebook on the table. "You can throw millions, Alyawasian, but it won't teach honesty, or courage, or love." He didn't argue. He listened. And slowly, he began to see the cracks in his own armor, the ways wealth had insulated him from reality. He learned to carry water, to sit on dusty benches, to feel hunger pangs alongside the villagers he wanted to help. And yet, Ayaba's eyes often flicked to him with suspicion, as if she doubted his sincerity. Their days were long. The sun burned hot, the mosquitoes relentless, and the work overwhelming. But at night, under the stars, they would sit on the edge of the village pier, listening to waves lap against mangrove roots. Alyawasian would speak softly about dreams he had never shared with anyone, dreams he had thought were childish in a world where billions ruled. And Ayaba would laugh, sometimes bitterly, sometimes warmly, shaking her head at his idealism. One evening, as they watched the horizon glow with fire-colored clouds, she asked, "Do you really think money can fix what's broken here?" He took a deep breath. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know it can buy opportunity. And opportunity can give people a choice they didn't have before." Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "Choice is powerful. But love, real love, is stronger. And it's something you can't buy." He didn't answer. He only watched the sea and wondered if he could ever earn her trust completely. Weeks later, news from Lagos arrived like a storm. Alyawasian's competitors, jealous of his growing philanthropy and public image, started spreading rumors. "Alyawasian Adeyemi is trying to buy a village," headlines screamed. Politicians questioned the foundation's motives. Some villagers, initially welcoming, began whispering among themselves, uncertain if the billionaire's generosity carried strings they could not see. Ayaba confronted him that evening, frustration blazing in her eyes. "See what you've done. You wanted to help, and now half the city thinks we're puppets of your wealth." He shook his head. "I didn't ask for this. I only wanted to help." She crossed her arms. "And yet, people doubt our intentions." "Why?" "Because you have money. Because you are rich. And because you are meant to fail." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He realized that despite his money, despite his power, there were walls he could not buy down. Not in hearts hardened by injustice. Not in communities betrayed too many times. It was in that moment that he began to understand the real challenge. Not charity, not wealth, but trust. Tensions didn't stop there. In the evenings, when they returned to the small guest house the foundation had rented, Ayaba would retreat into silence, and Alyawasian would pace. He wanted to bridge the gap, but she pushed him away, testing his patience, testing his resolve. Then came the moment that changed everything. A local businessman named Kamau, who had once promised to donate to their foundation but later withdrew, spread a malicious rumor. He claimed that Alyawasian and Ayaba were secretly plotting to take control of the village's fishing industry, forcing locals to work for them at meager wages. By morning, tensions flared. Villagers confronted Ayaba, shouting accusations. She stood firm, but fear danced in their eyes. Alyawasian stepped forward, speaking calmly, openly, about his intentions, offering to show financial records, contracts, and transparent plans. It wasn't enough. Words were fragile against suspicion. Ayaba's hands shook with anger and fear. "See, even here, your wealth is poison. People can't separate good from power." For the first time, Alyawasian felt powerless. He realized that love, if it existed, would not be about heroics or donations. It would be about humility, patience, and consistency. Days later, a council of village elders convened under a giant baobab tree. Children played nearby, oblivious to the tension. Ayaba spoke on their behalf, explaining the foundation's work and intentions. Her voice carried conviction and fire. Alyawasian spoke after her, stripped of pretense, stripped of ego. "I came here not to take, but to give," he said. "I came not to command, but to learn. If trust must be earned, I am willing to spend a lifetime earning it. I came here because I believe in this village, and because I believe in the people who call it home." Silence fell. The elders looked at him with scrutiny. They asked questions, sharp, precise, penetrating. And he answered each one honestly, without deflection, without the shield of wealth. By sunset, the council's mood shifted. Respect replaced suspicion, albeit cautiously. Trust, fragile and tentative, began to root. Ayaba watched him, her anger giving way to admiration. Not for his money, not for his power, but for his willingness to be vulnerable, to admit he was not all-knowing, and to work without expectation of glory. And then, as if fate wanted to test them further, trouble came from a source neither had anticipated: love. Ayaba's old friend, Nia, arrived from Nairobi. Nia was smart, beautiful, and aware of the sway Ayaba held over the villagers. But Nia disliked Oluwaseun instantly. "He's manipulating you," she warned. "I know him. Men like him don't change. You've built walls around your heart, Ayaba. Don't let him tear them down only to replace them with lies." Ayaba didn't respond immediately. But the seed of doubt was planted. Could she trust someone so different from herself? Someone who had spent a lifetime in a world she hated? Oluwaseun sensed the tension. One night, as they sat on the dock, moonlight reflecting off calm waters, he asked, "Do you doubt me?" She looked at him, eyes filled with both frustration and something softer, something she refused to name. "I trust your work," she said cautiously. "I trust your words. But I don't know if I can trust your world. That world has caused too much pain." He nodded. He didn't try to convince her. He only said, "Then let me prove it. Not with words. Not with money. With action." It was in that silence, heavy with anticipation, that their bond shifted subtly, imperceptibly. Trust began to grow, not easily, not quickly, but with the patience of seasons passing, like mango trees bearing fruit after years of care. Yet danger loomed. Kamau's interference escalated, spreading false reports to media outlets. Headlines suggested that Oluwaseun's foundation was laundering money through Niali's fish market. Villagers whispered about betrayal. Ayaba confronted him, fury in her voice. "Look what your world has done. Even here, even now, your wealth is poison." He remained calm. "Then we must show them the truth. Together." The two worked tirelessly, holding open forums, explaining budgets, involving villagers in decision-making. Slowly, the tide began to turn. By the next month, even Kamau's harshest critics began acknowledging the foundation's transparency. Ayaba began to see not the billionaire, but the man behind the money, the one who fought alongside her in dust, sweat, and mud. And then, one evening, after months of toil, as children sang songs of harvest and gratitude, Ayaba turned to Oluwaseun. "You're not like the others," she whispered. "I hate that I like you. But you are changing things. Not with power, but with heart." Oluwaseun smiled. "And you've changed me, Ayaba. I didn't know I could be this person. I didn't know I could care this deeply about people who aren't on my payroll." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're stubborn, you know that." "Not stubborn," he said. "Determined." The winds of Niali shifted. Hope began to take root in hearts hardened by years of neglect. Love, tentative and fragile, began to bloom between them. But as their connection deepened, the shadows of jealousy, betrayal, and suspicion never fully disappeared. Oluwaseun realized that winning Ayaba's heart would require more than gestures of generosity. It required sacrifice, humility, and courage that went beyond money or influence. And in Niali, under the endless African sky, the story of a billionaire and a girl who hated the rich was just beginning. By the time the first rains of the new season fell over Niali, something between Ayaba and Oluwaseun had shifted from curiosity into something far more dangerous: hope. And hope, in places that had known disappointment for generations, was a fragile thing. It could heal, or it could destroy. The village was changing. Slowly, but visibly. The clinic had real medicine now, not expired donations. The school roof no longer leaked when storms arrived. Fishermen had access to better nets, not loans designed to trap them in debt. People started walking taller, speaking louder. Dignity had returned, and with it, pride. And pride always attracted enemies. Kamau didn't disappear. He adapted. Where lies failed, strategy stepped in. He understood one thing well: If he couldn't destroy Oluwasian's reputation, he could destroy his heart. The first blow came quietly. A journalist from Nairobi arrived unannounced, asking questions that felt rehearsed. He spoke to villagers, to teachers, to clinic workers. Then he spoke to Ayaba privately. His voice was polite, but his words were knives wrapped in silk. "Did you know," he said casually, "that Oluwasian Adeyemi is currently under investigation for offshore accounts linked to political bribery?" Ayaba felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. "That's a lie," she said immediately. The journalist shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But the documents exist. And when the story breaks, your foundation will be dragged into it. You'll be painted as the activist who sold out." That night, Ayaba couldn't sleep. She watched the ceiling fan spin, hearing her mother's voice from years ago. "Rich men don't save us. They use us." She wanted to believe Oluwasian was different. But doubt has a way of whispering louder in the dark. The next morning, she confronted him. "Tell me the truth," she said, not raising her voice, which somehow made it worse. "Are you hiding something?" Oluwasian froze. Not because he was guilty, but because he had never expected to be questioned like this by someone whose opinion mattered so much. "There are things from my past," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Deals I regret. Compromises I made to survive in a corrupt system. But I've never stolen from the poor. Never." She searched his face. "So the accounts," he exhaled. "Legal. Ugly. But legal. And I've been shutting them down." Silence stretched between them. Ayaba looked away. "You don't understand what it means for me. If you fall, I fall with you. And I've already lost too much to believe blindly." That word, blindly, cut him. "I'm not asking you to believe blindly," he said. "I'm asking you to watch what I do." But trust, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly. It splinters quietly. The article dropped a week later. International headlines. Nigerian outlets. American blogs picking up the story. African billionaires' charity questioned. Is philanthropy a front? The foundation's accounts were frozen pending investigation. Construction halted. Salaries delayed. The village felt it immediately. And anger returned faster than hope ever had. People whispered again. Some avoided Ayaba. Others accused her openly. "You brought this man here," a woman shouted at her in the market. "You let him play savior." Ayaba absorbed it all without responding. Guilt sat heavy on her chest, even though she knew she hadn't done wrong. Oluwasian tried to intervene, but his presence now sparked resentment. For the first time in his life, money couldn't solve the problem fast enough. Then came the betrayal. Nia, the friend who had warned Ayaba, was exposed as Kamau's collaborator. She had leaked internal foundation documents to the press in exchange for political favors. When the truth surfaced, it shattered Ayaba. She confronted Nia in private, voice shaking. "Why?" she asked. "You knew what this meant to me." Nia didn't apologize. She smiled thinly. "You were getting too close to him. You were forgetting who you are." Ayaba slapped her. Once. Clean. Final. That night, Ayaba made a decision. She left Niali. No goodbye to Oluwasian. No explanation. Just a note left on the wooden table of the guest house. "I need to find out who I am without your shadow. If what we have is real, it will survive distance." Oluwasian read the note twice, then a third time, feeling something inside him collapse. For the first time since he was a boy, he let himself break. Back in Lagos, the investigation dragged on. Lawyers advised silence. PR teams suggested distancing himself from the foundation. His board demanded he step back entirely. He refused. "They are not a brand," he said. "They are people." The board threatened to remove him. He resigned. News spread fast. A billionaire walking away from his empire for a scandal-ridden charity? Markets reacted. Shares fell. Friends vanished. Invitations stopped. Alyawasian moved into a modest apartment near the city center. No staff. No drivers. Just him and the echo of everything he had lost, and everything he refused to regret. Months passed. Ayaba resurfaced in Kisumu, working with a grassroots women's cooperative. No funding. No headlines. Just work. Honest, exhausting work. She slept on a mat, ate simple meals, listened to stories that mirrored her own. But no matter how busy she stayed, Alyawasian's presence lingered like a ghost. She missed the way he listened. The way he never interrupted. The way he stayed when things got ugly. One evening, a fisherman handed her his phone. "You should see this," he said. The video showed Alyawasian speaking at a small community forum in Lagos. No suit. No teleprompter. "They took my money," he said calmly. "They took my titles. But they couldn't take what I learned. That wealth without justice is theft. And I won't go back to the man I was." Ayaba's throat tightened. Weeks later, the investigation concluded. No criminal wrongdoing. The accounts were shut. The scandal traced back to Kamau's political network. Arrests followed. Public apologies came too late. Alyawasian was offered everything back. He declined. Instead, he returned to Niali. No convoy. No cameras. Just a man walking into a village that once doubted him and now watched in silence. He rebuilt the foundation from the ground up. Community-led. Transparent. Slow. One afternoon, as children practiced songs near the school, Ayaba appeared at the edge of the crowd. He didn't see her at first. When he did, he stopped breathing. She looked thinner. Stronger. Different. They stood facing each other, words heavy between them. "I'm sorry," she said first, "for leaving without trusting what I knew." "I'm sorry," he replied, "for thinking love would be easier than justice." They laughed softly, sadly. "I still hate the rich," she said. He smiled. "Good. Then keep me accountable." She stepped closer. "This doesn't mean a fairy tale." "Good," he said. "I'm done with fantasies." Under the vast African sky, surrounded by people who had seen them fall and rise, they stood not as billionaire and activist, but as two flawed humans choosing to stay. And that choice changed everything. The return to Niali was not celebrated with drums or speeches. There was no ceremony waiting for Ayaba and Alyawasian. Only quiet observation. Only eyes that had learned to be cautious with hope. The village had been burned before by promises that evaporated with headlines. This time, people waited to see if staying truly meant staying. Alyawasian rented a small house near the shore, nothing like the estates he once owned. Every morning he walked to the foundation office carrying his own bag, greeting fishermen by name, helping unload supplies, sitting through long meetings where villagers questioned every decision. He answered patiently. He explained slowly. And when he didn't know something, he admitted it. Ayaba watched him closely. Not with suspicion this time, but with attention. She had learned something during her time away. Fighting the rich wasn't the same as fighting injustice. Sometimes the enemy wasn't money. It was ego, silence, fear. And she had seen Alyawasian shed all three. Still, love did not come easily. They worked side by side, sometimes laughing, sometimes clashing, sometimes walking in silence along the beach as the sun sank into the ocean like a promise being kept. One night, after a long community meeting where a young teacher challenged the foundation's priorities, Ayaba finally said what had been sitting in her chest for months. "If we do this," she said quietly, "it can't be because you need redemption or I need proof. It has to be because we choose each other without conditions." Alyawasian stopped walking. "I lost everything I thought defined me," he said. "But I didn't lose you. Even when you left, I carried you with me. Not as a savior. Not as an idea. As truth." She looked at him then, not the billionaire, not the symbol, but the man. And she nodded. The next months were the hardest and the most meaningful of their lives. Funding came slowly. They refused large donations that demanded control. They built systems that forced transparency, even when it delayed progress. Mistakes were made. Arguments erupted. But the village no longer whispered. It participated. Women ran the clinic committee. Fishermen managed the cooperative. Teachers decided curriculum improvements. Power shifted, and that terrified people who had benefited from the old order. Kamau's allies did not disappear quietly. One night, a fire broke out at the storage facility. Supplies burned. Records were destroyed. It was meant to scare them. Instead, it united them. The village rebuilt the facility together. Men, women, children, brick by brick. No speeches. No donors. Just hands and resolve. American journalists arrived again, but this time the story was different. Former billionaire rejects empire to rebuild community-led foundation, one headline read. Alyawazian refused interviews. Ayaba gave one. We don't need saviors, she said calmly into the camera. We need partners who stay when it's no longer glamorous. The clip went viral. Donations followed, but this time, small ones. Teachers in Detroit. Nurses in Atlanta. Students in California. People who understood struggle. One evening, Alyawazian received an email from a U.S. investment group offering him a return to power, quietly. Clean slate. Bigger wealth. He deleted it. That night, sitting by the water, he told Ayaba everything. She smiled faintly. I was wondering how long it would take. You're not angry? He asked. No, she said. Because the old you would have said yes and hidden it. He exhaled, realizing how far he had come. As the year turned, something unexpected happened. Alyawazian fell ill. It started as exhaustion, then fever, then weakness that left him unable to stand. The clinic did what it could, but his condition worsened. The nearest advanced hospital was hours away. Ayaba stayed by his side, fear clawing at her chest. Don't you dare leave me after everything, she whispered, holding his hand. He smiled weakly. You hate the rich, he murmured. Imagine the irony. Tears fell freely now. He was transferred to the city just in time. Severe infection. Treatable, but close. When he woke days later, Ayaba was asleep in the chair beside him, head resting against the bed. In that moment, stripped of strength, wealth, and certainty, Alyawazian understood something profound. Love was not sacrifice alone. It was presence. When he recovered, he did not make a grand announcement. He simply returned to Niali, and asked Ayaba a question one quiet morning as they watched children run to school. Will you build a life with me? He asked. Not above anyone. Not behind anyone. With me. She didn't answer immediately. She thought of her father. Her mother. The years of anger that had kept her alive but lonely. I won't stop fighting injustice, she said. Good, he replied. I'll fight with you. I won't worship money, she added. Neither will I. I won't forgive corruption. Neither will I. She took his hand. Then yes. They didn't marry in luxury. No celebrity guests. No spectacle. Just community, music, shared food, laughter, tears. People danced barefoot in the sand. Elders blessed them. Children sang. Not a fairy tale. A choice. Years later, the foundation became a model studied in American universities, not for its funding, but for its structure. Community ownership. Radical transparency. Love without saviors. Alyawazian never returned to billionaire lists. Ayaba never stopped challenging power. And together, they proved something the world rarely believes. That a man born into excess could unlearn it. That a woman forged by pain could choose love without surrendering herself. That justice, when paired with humility, could outlive money, and that sometimes the most shocking thing that happens after love is that it lasts.